Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for this day that we've been blessed to receive. Thank you for the unlearning that we have to do. We continue to see things so one-dimensional, and we ask for your grace and your truth as we search to change the words that we use in conversations, to understand a more holistic viewpoint and picture of the topics and studies that we are engrossing ourselves with. We ask that you'll pour out your Spirit upon us, that we may learn of you, that we may grow and comprehend the social issues that are causing upheaval throughout our planet. And we ask for the courage and the strength and the determination to change the wrong understanding, the wrong thinking that we have, and that we may have great examples and evidence to give to others if ever they ask our viewpoint on these things. We thank you for hearing and answering our prayers. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. This morning we are going to be reviewing a study Elder Tess did back in, I want to say 2022, and it was titled The Far Left and the Multipolar Vision, multipolar or multilateral. So from the beginning of the Midnight Cry message, Elder Tess showed us the unfolding of two streams of information. And she depicted this by a simple drawing of two rivers. And these two rivers were labeled CNN and Fox. This was back in 2018 when she first started giving the Midnight Cry message. CNN and Fox were the representation of the two. They were the poster child of each stream that they represented. So Fox News was the poster child for the stream of information here, and CNN for the left. But we understand, and as Elder Tess taught, that two streams can be traced all the way back to heaven, where we saw the rebellion with Lucifer against God and his rule, God's rule. So when we view these two rivers from afar, we're able to see a very simple image when we got to view it back in heaven, that one was right, one was correct, and the other was false. One was true, one was false. When you view it from the viewpoint of heaven, God was giving the information in heaven. Lucifer was giving an alternative information in heaven that was incorrect. So from that stance, you can see that a very simple depiction of the rivers shows one is true and one is correct. After presenting the Midnight Cry message showing two streams of information, Elder Tess began to show a close-up view of these two streams, both CNN and Fox. And we could see that the simple right and wrong stream works for a particular history, as we just mentioned, in heaven. But when we bring it down to our time here at the end of the world, where we are at the final reform line and the end of Earth's history, we live in an information age. So we require a healthier understanding and a more advanced understanding of the information wars that are raging around us. And that's part of the previous questions in Taylor's studies. How do we explain this to other people? How do we get other people to view that viewpoint? And that's having to expand our understanding of how we view gender. In the past, we have been very ignorant and believed that there was male and female. We understand that it goes far greater than that. We're doing the same here with information, learning that it's true and there's false information. But as we get down to the end of the world, it's not just true and false information. And we'll start to look at these things. So as we know, this is a simplification of a message that would eventually cut deep into everyone within this movement, because as we would learn, it would strike at our core beliefs, our practices, and our way of living. It forces us to look at and question our thoughts and our habits and our behavior. Everything that we had been so carefully taught by a conservative church or a conservative community that steeped in and loved its culture. And this is what we're breaking down, the culture that we have imbibed. I read a nice metaphor depicting culture as an iceberg. So we know that an iceberg is predominantly above below the waterline, so we can see a small amount above the waterline here. This is what we can see of the culture and how it affects us. And then below the surface is a far greater, far-reaching and deeper and more impactful problem to deal with. And this is, when you think about the Titanic or any boat that hits an iceberg, the boat is brought down by the iceberg that's underneath the water. That's what tears a hole in the boat and sinks a ship, which I thought was quite a nice analogy as we're heading towards shipwreck for the institutions. And these institutions are shipwrecked based on culture, unwilling to turn away from their current culture. So journalists writing good articles have highlighted the differences, the deficiencies and the problems between these two streams of information, between CNN and Fox, and highlighted these inconsistencies and these problems. And this is in turn polarizing the citizens based on their deeply ingrained sense of culture. So polarization isn't just another way of saying that people are being pushed further from a centrist viewpoint. If we were to have a line up here that just showed say a very basic political spectrum, these two streams of information and the way they're being used, along with many other factors, are pushing people away from these more centrist aligning thoughts and cultures and pushing them to extremes based on their beliefs, which we're going to start looking at. So we have continued to develop our understanding of the information war that is raging around us. From the creation of the World Wide Web at the beginning of our reform line, and through, if we were to put a reform line of beginning at 1989, we see the introduction of the World Wide Web, and then journalism becoming online, as well as the creation of platforms that are available to us as we continued through our reform line. The number of platforms available has skyrocketed. There are many platforms available for us, and by platforms I mean emails, texts, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, WeChat, TikTok, and Reddit, those sorts of platforms that are used via the internet to send out information. So these are all being growing and increasingly accessible to the entire world the further we go on. Back at the very beginning, we had very few people able to connect to the internet. As we progress to our current date, we have most of the world is connected, with the exception of some very poor communities in struggling countries. Some of these platforms, as Elder Tess has pointed out, have been created with poor intentions in mind. So you might recall that Facebook was brought up by Elder Tess and looked at its origins and its beginnings and how it started in university in a vile way, but then how it has seemingly been changed to a platform that has been used for different methods now. But most of these platforms have been designed by people to be useful tools to benefit our lives, to connect with people, to connect with businesses, to used as a method of gaining new knowledge or greater understanding on topics that you want to pursue. Unfortunately, like any tool, it can be used for good purposes or it can use for bad purposes. So because information technology has launched and excelled at such a fast pace, many laws have needed to be written to govern the safe and effective use of these platforms, so that prevents their platforms from being weaponized. There's lots of reasons why these laws haven't been written or implemented. One of the issues is that Silicon Valley has not wanted oversight from the government. They've wanted as little oversight as possible to retain the power that they have. And part of that is based in their culture and their beliefs. Silicon Valley is predominantly left-wing thinking. The whole area is the tech industry. So they don't want the government to intervene, or as little as possible, they would try to keep them out as well. But we also know that the legislative departments have been slow to respond. It's something that they haven't had to deal with in this way. And so it's taking a while for laws and systems to be put in place that stop the misuse of platforms or the weaponization of platforms being used and targeted against us, the users, as we're online learning, searching, growing, and connecting with people. So whenever there's a void, something always comes to fill that void. And we understand that Cambridge Analytica, with the void of laws and systems in place to stop platforms being weaponized, Cambridge Analytica was one of the big ones that came to light in the past few years, as well as different corporations and companies. We understand the Internet Research Agency and many more that purchased our information or acquired it, were given it, or stole our information. It stole our viewing habits, it stole our concerns, our fears, and our culture, and it fed them into an algorithm that would spread misinformation or disinformation that would compel the viewer to act in fear or out of anger based on their cultural beliefs. So back in 2016, we understand that the election was taking place. There was a person who used to work at Time magazine. They were the editor there. They had multiple roles with Time magazine. And they moved over to the State Department within the US and were looking at ways of communication, one of their jobs. And so just before the 2016 election, this person was in Russia, and we're about to share pieces of an article that explain Russia and what they were doing and their involvement in information wars. I will just share screen. When I was at the State Department, there were hundreds of thousands of cyber attacks a day. The Pentagon says it thwarts more than 1 million malware attacks per hour. About 600,000 Facebook accounts are compromised every day, and more than 25 million data records are lost or stolen from businesses each day. And all that doesn't even take into account the rising tide of disinformation, which is impossible to measure. So this jumped out as me being 2016. This was written a little bit later. So this person is writing about events that took place in 2016, but the article was written in 2019, 2020. So these numbers are staggering. The amount of malware attacks, the Facebook accounts that are compromised, data is being stripped left, right, and center from what are meant to be secure places, and being sold or used inappropriately against the citizens of various countries. And what's interesting is that at this point, it is mostly Russia in early 2016 that are doing this. And as we're going to read, others start to come on board in this information war that we're seeing taking place. We'll continue reading the next paragraph. It is a war without limits and boundaries, and one we still don't know how to fight. Governments, non-state actors, and terrorists are creating their own narratives that have nothing to do with reality. These false narratives undermine our democracy and the ability of free people to make intelligent choices. The disinformationists are aided by the big platform companies who benefit as much from sharing of the false as from the true. The bad guys use all the same behavioral and information tools supplied by Facebook, Google, and Twitter. Just as Nike buys your information to sell you sneakers, the Russians bought your information to persuade you that America is a mess. Autocrats have learned the same tools, once seen as spreading democracy, can also undermine it. So some of the points in here that we're looking at, we understand that they're taking the information that they're gaining on us and then feeding us back with things that are not real, that are false narratives. And what's upsetting is that these big platform companies provide them with those algorithms and tools necessary to be able to continue the attack. Now, the platforms are being investigated, and there's currently lots of things happening in courts to try and make our data safer. But it's not going to happen straight away. And as soon as it's made safer, there's this continual merry-go-round where hackers will find another way into a system. So no system is ever completely safe. So there's a line here in the middle that says, the disinformationists are aided by the platform companies who benefit as much from sharing the false as from the true. So part of this is, if you go onto a YouTube, on your internet and you view something, that view is recorded, and after a certain amount of views, the person who uploaded that video is paid a fee. Now, when you have a YouTube site that generates millions of views on the videos, you have advertisers who want to advertise their products on your YouTube site because it gets the most amount of exposure to the people, their audience. So this is what it means, that they benefit as much from sharing false information as from true. It doesn't matter what's posted on that YouTube site. This is YouTube as an example, whether it's false or whether it's true. It just matters the amount of views that it gets. And there are algorithms written into the background that incentivize monetary incentivization of the people who own those accounts to continue to create material that will get them the most amount of views. So this is one of the problems that we're seeing within the tech sector. The algorithms are not suitable for purpose. So going down to the next paragraph. What we also saw, which was not written about in the Mueller report, is how fake news from the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, was complemented by traditional Russian media like RT and the new digital arm Sputnik. The trolls from the IRA would retweet RT and Sputnik stories. RT is Russia Today. It used to be called Russia Today. And Sputnik and RT would pick up some of the false leads from the Internet Research Agency. And then the Russian Foreign Ministry would give credence to all of it. So we're seeing this merry-go-round taking place. I'll stop sharing for just a moment. Where we have the IRA, RT, and Sputnik, and then we'll just say Kremlin. They would continue to feed these information sources around didn't matter if they are false. And once enough people had come into view with these informations and theories that were being passed around, it gave it some form of credibility. And that's something that we're going to see taking place, not just within Russia, but in America, within every country that we have. So I'll go back to sharing that screen with you again. So halfway through this paragraph, we're reading from this point here. One thing we know is Russia does not have an off switch. Sanctions slow but do not deter it. And as Putin sees a friendly face in the White House, referring obviously to Donald Trump, he's going to continue to probe and interfere. So we must assume the Russians are already preparing for 2020. This starts to, or increasingly becomes relevant as we're heading towards 2024, and we know 2024 to be another election year within the US. But not just the US. There are quite a lot of countries around the world that are going to go through an election process. And as we'll continue reading, this process is going to be under attack by multiple countries seeking to sow disorder in any way they can. While the Russians have pioneered election interference, they are no longer alone. In the intelligence world, countries copy what works, and the FBI has already said that China and Iran are getting in on the game. Just this year, Facebook and Twitter have taken down hundreds of accounts and handles affiliated with Iran influence operations. China has used online influence to counter the Hong Kong protesters. It's hard to imagine that they won't experiment against the US. So that's an opinion point there. I've long thought that we don't have a fake news problem. We have a media literacy problem. I particularly like that last point there. The writer goes on to share that all the information out there, if we supplied people with the necessary tools in order to spot fake news and to be able to understand what's real and what's not, would take away many of the problems there that we have from a lack of legislative protection for us as citizens. So these tactics have been used successfully, these tactics of using media platforms to spread information and misinformation and disinformation by governments all around the world. And they help to overthrow and make regime changes in countries. And part of the reason why they do this is to put people in power in those countries that will strengthen their spheres of influence. So we understand that at a very basic understanding, we have two spheres of influence through the world. We have the King of the North and the King of the South. And these countries where we're seeing tech platforms used as weaponized tools to overthrow governments and regimes, or to strengthen them even, are being used in order to place countries into one or two spheres, whether it's loosely termed as the King of the South, a term that we've put on it here in this movement, or the King of the North. So we understand we're living in an information age, and our wars are based on or battled with information or disinformation and misinformation. So information is weaponized for good, or weaponized for evil. It's good information is used to counter misinformation and disinformation. And conversely, misinformation and disinformation is countering good information. We know that literal wars are made up of individual battles and contribute to determining the victor of the war. And what we're seeing ourselves is a war that is being battled with information. And there are wins for and against both teams. War's never one-sided. So there's victories and losses sustained by both sides. If we want to look at these two parties here, we're seeing the King of the North will succeed in some countries, the King of the South will succeed in other countries, or they will slow their progress or help the overall war effect of information war. But at the same time that these individual these countries are determining who they want to align with in terms of influence, there's also a battle taking place within the country itself. So if you take Australia, for example, Australia would align under the King of the North. This is where our policy and allegiances lie, with these spheres of influence. But within the country of Australia, we have the same rift in society that we see within the USA. We see a tearing away from centrist views to extreme viewpoints based on culture, people wanting to hold on to their culture and unwilling to let go of these thoughts and ideas, no matter how harmful they may be to people. So we see this polarization into left wing and right wing based on a political spectrum. Some of the battles that we've seen fought in recent times are Obama's election. In 2008, Obama becomes president, and we think that the left, the Democrats, have won a great victory, and that they've dealt a blow to the right or to republicanism. And that's true. But it's only temporary. We know that there's ebbs and flows, there's battles and there's victories and losses. So the right, the Republicans, they come back more fierce and determined to break or to twist or to bend their interpretations of the laws to retain their ideals of culture and society. So each time there's a battle, it becomes more fierce, and people are willing or desperate to do anything that they need to do to hold on to their culture, which is why we see it becoming very violent and why we saw the January insurrection, the storming of the Capitol. We have these groups spreading disinformation to the public. The public are holding on to their fears and grasping it and getting angry and worked up, even if there has no truth in it, and then going and making the decisions that they did with the insurrection. So when Obama came to president, we saw back then the beginning of the mobilization of multiple militia groups. Militia groups can be seen on either side of the political spectrum, but by far you get the most over here in right-wing republicanism and conspiracy theories. This is where the vast majority of your militia groups come from. These groups started to mobilize after the election of President Obama. We also saw the work and heard the work that Mitch McConnell did in restructuring the Republican Party. 2014 and through prior to those years, we see the Republican Party itself started to purge or move people that were in this area. They kicked them out, or they asked them to move to a more hardline stance of republicanism, a more extreme version of republicanism, creating less resistance to what their ideals are and how they're trying to push them through society, as well as consolidating their power in this area. We have seen every time that there's a victory, there is a follow-up, a second battle that's going to come along. You might say a counterattack. We saw gay marriage. Gay marriage was passed in America, and then we started to see the backlash against that, and we're started to see that now, and will continue to be an issue as we head forward. We saw the Me Too backlash, which was a very messy court battle that took place in the US between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. So we see that whenever there is this ground that is made in either direction, we see a counteroffensive launched. But the most ground is gained through this right-wing Republican Party. So if you start to look at who is winning for primary candidates at the moment as we head to the 2024 election, we're seeing a trend of people moving away from harsh rhetoric style of Donald Trump and opting to use smoother language, but the same malice behind the message is still put forward. So while they've purged this mindset here, they've brought people over to the center. What they're beginning to do is realize that they're losing their base. A lot of people were upset with a lot of Republicans were upset with how they were tarnished by some of Donald Trump's antics. Most of them still agree with most of what he did, but they're upset by what he's done. And so they're trying to send people in this area with words that sound nice, but they still have exactly the same meaning behind them. And then you'll have people like Ted Cruz who are just quite extreme and are going to continue with the same rhetoric. And I'm sure we'll see Donald Trump run again, and I highly doubt that he'll be censored too much either. So people are realizing that their base will leave them if they speak too much out of turn. In particular, one of the, or not one, quite a few big donors to the Republican Party have said that they're not going to continue giving money for the election process, as they were disenfranchised from the events that have taken place in recent times. So there are members of the Republican Party who are not endorsed by Donald Trump, using the same conspiratorial method or methodology, but using words that aren't as abrasive so that they don't lose their voter base. And these are the people we're seeing rise up in the next election. So we're going to look at two journalists now. So what we're looking at is that two streams of information. When you're looking at from heaven, you can see a right and a wrong information. As we go through the ages, come down to our final generation here, we see that we were taught in 2018 a very simple model of CNN and Fox, that one was right and one was wrong. And this is in order to take the baby steps necessary to be able to learn and understand healthier versions of a subject, this being information wars. As we get down, we understand that CNN as a title, left-wing media, needs to be sifted just as much as Fox. In fact, we don't even go to Fox for our news. We stay with the left, but we sift carefully because most of it is not usable information. So now we're going to compare and contrast two presenters who are called journalists. One over here on the left, Max Blumenthal, and the other one we're going to compare with will be Tucker Carlson. And let's just take a basic look at who these two people are, what they represent, and where their views align and where they don't align. So I'm going to share screen with you again, and we're going to start by just reading some basic information on Max Blumenthal, how he started, where he has written, where he has had work published, and some of his thoughts and processes that come through in his writing. So Max Blumenthal is an American author and blogger. Blumenthal is the editor of the Grey Zone website, which is known for its apologetic coverage of, among other authoritarian regimes, the Chinese, the Russian, Syrian, and Venezuelan governments, as well as the denial of the Uyghur genocide and many other of these atrocities committed by these regimes. So Max Blumenthal is going to tell you that China's not doing anything bad, Russia's doing good, it should go and invade these countries that it wants to invade. It'll tell you that the Syrian atrocities didn't take place, and that Venezuelan government, particularly Maduro, is good. Nothing wrong taking place over there, and tell you that the Uyghur genocide is a hoax. So this person, Max, the grey zone is a far left, as far left as you can go in terms of media bias. But his views of world policy and world events do not agree with anything that we speak with or speak to. So Max Blumenthal, he was a writer for The Nation. It's going to go through a list of different places where he wrote: Alternet, The Daily Beast, Alkebar, and Media Matters for America, and has contributed to Al Jazeera English, the New York Times, and the Los Angeles Times. He has been a writing fellow of the National Institute. He's a regular contributor to Russian state-owned Sputnik and RT, which is Russia Today, and has frequently used his various platforms to spread Russian propaganda. So even the New York Times has gotten caught up with publishing some of his articles that he's written. So when we're on the left, we need to sift carefully. Blumenthal has contributed to broadcasts on RT, formerly known as Russia Today, on many occasions. In December 2015, during a visit to Moscow, presumed by multiple sources to have been paid for by the Kremlin, Blumenthal was a guest at RT's 10 years on-air anniversary party attended by Vladimir Putin. Also attended by Lieutenant General Michael Flynn of the United States and English politician Ken Livingstone. In an interview with Tucker Carlson on Fox News in November of 2017, Blumenthal defended RT against the charges that it's Kremlin propaganda. So we're talking about Tucker Carlson, and we see Tucker Carlson and Max Blumenthal. They've been on air together, although they're opposed. They're on two different sides. Max Blumenthal on the left, Tucker Carlson on the right. Sometimes their views align, although they're very different. Their views align sometimes, and they'll come and talk about those things. So here we have a picture of Max Blumenthal. Blumenthal's articles and video reports have been published by the Daily Beast, The Nation, Huffington Post, New York Times, and Los Angeles, and Columbia Journalism. So one of the interesting points that's been brought up is that Max Blumenthal went to Russia, got a whole heap of money, and came back to America and started a website called The Grey Zone. It's been referred to by multiple sources. It's very interesting that he then starts up a pro-Russian website within the USA to continue sharing his views. So we're going to take a look at Tucker Carlson and some of the viewpoints that we're going to see from him. So we've seen that Max Blumenthal does not like foreign intervention. He doesn't want America to go into other countries and stop abuses from taking place. He wants the people to go and sort it out and do it for themselves. So it seems very contradictory for a person to be on the left who, in theory, should be putting equality over freedom. But then we see these instances where the countries are given their freedom to do whatever they want, even trampling over the equality of their citizens. And now we'll view some of the things that Tucker Carlson believes in and has continually published online. I'll share screen again. So this is a picture of Tucker Carlson. I'm sure all of you will have seen Tucker Carlson and Max Blumenthal before. He is an American conservative political commentator, a writer and a television personality who hosted the nightly political talk show Tucker Carlson Tonight on Fox News from 2016 to 2023. So just in the past few days, he has been removed from Fox News. Carlson is a vocal opponent of progressivism and a critic of immigration, and has been described by the Washington Post and the Atlantic as a nationalist, and by CNN as a right-wing extremist. So here, just pointing out that Tucker Carlson is quite far right in terms of media bias. He was formerly an economic libertarian, and he now supports protectionism. In 2004, he renounced his initial support for the Iraq War and has since been skeptical of US foreign interventions. Carlson has promoted conspiracy theories on topics such as demographic replacement, COVID-19, and the January 6th United States Capitol attack, and has been noted for false and misleading statements about those topics and a number of others. So Tucker Carlson has been to court multiple times. The people have tried to sue him. Most of them don't win. Judges are often citing that he is a commentator, not so much a journalist. So part of what we see on YouTube and other platforms, as well as Fox News, is they view their popularity or their success through ratings. Tucker Carlson was one of the, depending on the time at Fox News, top 4 up to the second best ratings of any nightly views that Fox News had. So each weeknight, Tucker Carlson did his show, and he would get between 2 and 3 million people view his show every night. That's a lot of people. So with that viewing comes the ads that they play during those segments. So they're getting lots of money coming from people wanting to sell their products through these time slots. It's no different from what we have here in Australia. If you sit down at 6 o'clock, you've got your news, and from 6 o'clock till 8:30, the prime time, any ads that are aired on TV during that period, it costs a fortune to be there because you get your highest exposure. So we're seeing the same system in place where views are getting get the money for the company. So Tucker Carlson gets people on his show. Doesn't matter if he agrees with them or disagrees with them. He berates them and or agrees with them. And then they'll do what you'll see on YouTube a lot is reactions. So you might go onto YouTube and you'll watch somebody watching something else for the first time, and you'll see reaction. And this is what Tucker Carlson has been quite famous for. His reactions to what people say, or how he agrees with or disagrees with what has been said by his person and he's invited onto the show. And so he plays for the cameras. We understand this also through the documents that have come out through the recent, I can't think of their dominance. Why does that name escape me? Through the recent court case that we had with Fox News, where they've lost their court battle and has settled out of court. So we see these little victories for equality when we see, thank you, Sandra, Dominion lawsuit versus Fox News. We see these victories for equality and we see the same figures rebrand or recreate themselves into whatever is necessary to influence a greater audience. So we're going to see Tucker Carlson. He's recently been moved from Fox. He won't go away. He's going to be continual noise somewhere else, trying to influence as many people as possible. They're media influencers. They're not so much journalists, not good journalists anyway. So being a far right wing media presenter, he's made his opinions clear regarding sexuality. He will be very, it's male, female, there's nothing in between. Tucker Carlson will also tell you that gender sexuality, coming down to, he would be opposed to homosexuality and anything to do with the LGBTQIA community. You know that he's very racist on air and off air. I don't know how he hasn't been pulled up for it, but he gets away with it. He's very nationalistic as well. Loves his Second Amendment rights. And we've started to see his, just in a few lines here, his foreign policy beliefs. Tucker Carlson differs from Max Blumenthal here. Tucker Carlson wants America to be number one, wants it to be on top. What we would call a unipolar belief that America is the greatest and will therefore dominate every other country and bring it under its rule. They want to be first in everything. We see Max Blumenthal is of a opposite opinion, completely different platform. Max Blumenthal doesn't want this unipolar idea. The far left wants a multipolar ideal in order to push forward their ideas. So Max Blumenthal doesn't want intervention into other countries, as well as a lot of the people on the right want minimal interaction with those countries. So they're two completely different platforms, but sometimes their views align on certain points. And when their views align, they come together and they share their thoughts. So there's no great United States entering a country to overthrow a government in order to install its own Western-friendly governments or oppose US foreign intervention into incidents outside of its country. So this is what the left wants. The left wants, they don't want a big United States that goes in and overthrows. They want a small government, and they want to keep people out. And they don't want to influence other elections or other campaigns or have foreign influence within other countries. And the far left wants to hold America and the West accountable for their foreign policy procedures. And they'll title this imperialism and colonialism. And we're seeing very opposite and different views from Tucker Carlson. So the USA is not a hero in the eyes of the far left. We find out from Tucker Carlson that he's very easy or relaxed or pro-Russia. So again, these two sides are depicted by two faces that we've seen, that are journalists who are using platforms to spread information, misinformation and disinformation, in order to influence as many people as possible, one for political gain, for power, another for money. They're both well paid, and for continuing to develop that following that they have. So this is what we saw in heaven, in the sense that we had God, the Godhead, versus Lucifer, the disinformation that was taking place, and how it affected the angels within heaven. As it comes down to earth, we have the same process going on. We've got the proxy war taking place, and we have this war raging around us as we're here in 2023, and trying as best we can to understand the information that's bombarding us. There's so much of it out there, as Elder Terry mentioned just a moment ago, with the events that have taken place in the past week or so. And it's collecting those good pieces of information and dissecting them, and understanding the two platforms and how they differ from radical feminism. So radical feminism doesn't align itself with the far left thoughts of Max Blumenthal, nor does it align itself with the far right of Tucker Carlson. These two are just examples of people with those mindsets. And I think we will close there, and we'll go into a further study next time. So we'll close in prayer, and I will ask afterwards if there's any questions or comments to be made. So if you're able to kneel or bow your head, we'll close in prayer. Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for this day that we've been blessed to receive. And we thank you for the cold weather and the rain that we're receiving here, the change of seasons. We ask for a continued blessing throughout the Sabbath as we learn and focus on the information and disinformation that is prevalent in our society, that affects our culture, that feeds off of our culture. We ask for the discernment to understand and rightly discern between the true stream and the false stream, and to make the changes in our lives necessary to stop our cultural violations of God's law, the misogyny, the abuse, the hierarchy and headship that we see in our own behaviors. And we ask that we will please stop and put forth every effort to change, that we may be fit in order to serve. We thank you for hearing these prayers in Jesus' name. Amen.